Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm pleased to be joined by Ophir Ronen, the CEO and founder of CalmWave. How are you today, Ophir?
I'm doing very well. Thanks so much, Dario.
Excellent, excellent. So let's just jump in here. Why don't you just start by telling us a little bit about CalmWave?
Sure. My company CalmWave is a hospital operations platform. And what we do is we focus on remediating alarm fatigue in hospital ICUs as the entry point into hospital systems.
Interesting. So, where did your inspiration for this come from? Tell us about, how you founded the company and your evolution to this point.
Yeah, great question. So my background is actually enterprise IT operations at scale, not healthcare.
Yeah.
And I have suffered from and solved the problem of alarm fatigue at scale for Fortune 100 companies throughout my career. My last company was sold to PagerDuty, if you're familiar
Oh,
with them.
sure. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. So I think defining two terms is really important here. So there's alerts. Alerts are what you send to people to let them know there's a problem, or in our cases, getting woken up in the middle of the night to solve things. And there's alarms. Alarms come from the things, whether hardware or software.
Yeah.
And whenever you see a one-to-one association between alarms and alerts, you know there's trouble. There's always more alarms than there should be alerts. That was the case in enterprise IT and is the case in healthcare, right?
Gotcha.
That's a recipe for alarm fatigue. So when I sold my company to PagerDuty at the time of acquisition, PagerDuty was focused on guaranteed delivery alerting. So they would make sure that when you had a major outage and you were losing millions of dollars an hour, you could marshal your teams to solve the problem. My company was focused on the ingestion of high frequency alarms from big IT management systems. We would normalize all of that data into a common event format. We would suppress the non-actionable alarms, cluster the important alarms, the actionable alarms, and important signals into an incident, which is a container of context, and then send that to PagerDuty for guaranteed delivery alerting. So, as I told Alex Solomon, the PagerDuty co-founder and former CEO, Alex, what we're doing together is peanut butter and jelly. I have alarms, you have alerts. It's the entire enterprise IT operations workflow. And I did that because, you know, for me, acquisitions are nice, but I like building innovation on very large data sets that are ideally novel.
Yeah.
And at the time of acquisition, PagerDuty had arguably 10 years more data than I did.
Huh.
So I wanted their data. So I came on board, I built out the team and the pillar of their product offering that's now called Event Intelligence, which is how you handle high frequency alarms in that environment. And then I got the opportunity to build something based on that data. And what I built is what we called operations health. And operations health was all about algorithmically determining the impact of being in operations on the people of operations. So it was
Huh.
focused on how do you fix your operations so you don't lose your preciously curated engineering talent? Because if you lost an engineer, it could be 3 to 500K all in to get a new one of that caliber. So we would create these composite scores 0 to 100 and then use the underlying data to score every engineer, score every team, and score every software service. So we could go to folks like IBM and say, hey, of your thousands of software services, these 10 are causing the greatest degradation of operations health to these teams. And here are the people on those teams that statistically speaking, you're going to lose in 1 to 2 quarters unless you do something about it. And then
Huh.
I built out PagerDuty's expert services teams that would go in and objectively improve the operations based on adoption of PagerDuty features, implementation of best practices, and so on.
So is the issue then false alarms? Like I guess intuitively it
Yeah,
makes sense that if everyone's, it's like the boy who cried wolf, right?
that's right. That's right. I would actually characterize them as non-actionable alarms because
Yeah.
false depends on the context,
Yeah.
right? So I would say that any domain that has sensors will have this problem,
Mm.
right? Because when you have sensors, those sensors generate signals. Signals are monitored between upper and lower bounds of whether or not they're in their operating, environment. Anything that breaches those limits will generate alarms. There's
Ah,
always way too many alarms.
right.
So this same problem that we solve in enterprise IT are now solving in healthcare also applies to defense, manufacturing, energy, agriculture.
Right.
Again, any domain that has sensors. So for us, our company is focused on this pattern that we developed in enterprise IT and disseminating it across domains. Right now, we're in healthcare, just to be clear.
Yeah.
The,
Give,
the
give us an
genesis,
example.
yeah.
Give us a.
Yeah. So what CalmWave does when we go into a hospital system is we integrate and fuse two isolated data silos, both of which important but are distinct. One is the EHR, and that's medications, interventions, labs, notes, nurse to patient assignments, and more, and the middleware that's aggregating the high frequency vitals and alarms. And so we time align and normalize all of that data into the CalmWave common signal format, which is a well structured format designed from the ground up for data science. That provides us really unique capabilities because we've assembled the most comprehensive patient record that exists, because the high frequency vitals and alarms are deleted on a rolling 30-day basis, gone forever.
Ah, wow. So tell us
Yeah.
about the AI aspect of this. What are you using the AI to do, and how does it work?
Yeah. So one of the things that's really key is to first build trust,
Yeah.
right? Like it's really, really difficult to go into critical care of all the areas in a hospital system and to say, hey, I've got this great AI. It's going to be awesome,
Yeah.
right? Because ultimately the clinicians are the ones that are responsible. They're the ones who are going to be impacted if something goes wrong, not the AI.
Yeah.
So, one really nice anecdote from one of our charter customers is, 2 weeks before we signed a comprehensive agreement for the entire system, right? So this is 14 hospitals in this system. We were called in to do a presentation in front of the network chief medical officer, network chief medical informatics officers, two chief nursing officers, and their staff. So there's like 30 people at this meeting. And we were told ahead of time, hey, so what? The network chief medical informatics officer is a brilliant guy, but he's also Dr. No. And if he doesn't like you, then you're done.
Right.
So
Right.
no pressure.
Right.
So we fly in and we start the presentation. And yeah, like 30 people in the room. We're going through a value prop, what we do, why we do it. And then we start getting into the math and the science, because for us, we use the classical methods, right? Machine learning, statistics, mathematics, because it's really important for them to understand and trust what we do. And, the core of CalmWave data science actually comes out of aerospace,
Hmm.
giant sensor data sets.
Right.
Safety is really, really important, that kind of mindset. And so, we're into the math and the science portion of the presentation. All of a sudden, this guy stands up in front of 30 people and he says, you guys shouldn't even call yourselves AI. Our heart drops. This is like 9 minutes into that section. Our heart drops. And then he says, you guys shouldn't even call yourselves AI. This is math and statistics. I understand exactly what you're doing. Well done. This is truly innovative. And
Wow.
internally, we were like,
Right.
and then 2 weeks later, we got the contract. So that really, really that validation was incredible, that we were on the right path of first building trust with clinicians, and then that opens the door to many other things beyond that.
So how did you go about, for example, quantifying your value proposition when, I guess, is
Yeah.
it the retention of key people? Tell us just a little bit more about that and how you build the business
Yeah.
case for this.
Yeah, absolutely. So the initial entry point that we used was retention of nurses. So
Yeah.
we're building operations health for nurses because today, two things are at play. One, there's an extreme issue with nurses leaving the profession and then being replaced by traveler nurses, right? Those are contract nurses. Those are 3 to 5x the cost of a full-time, ICU nurse. So the ROI and the way that we designed our pricing was based on that. We designed our pricing, and we're a SaaS-based product.
Yeah.
We designed our pricing so that when you look at the cost to a hospital of replacing a full-time ICU nurse on the east or west coast of the US, with CalmWave, saving one nurse from leaving the ICU over the course of an entire year because of objectively better working environment would pay for the CalmWave subscription for the entire ICU.
Oh, wow.
Now, we have a bunch more value on top of that. So we've got 4 dimensions of ROI, but that's a great entry point.
So do they get conditioned over time? I mean, do they sort of get like, I don't know how you would describe it, but maybe ultra sensitive to all the buzzing and beeping and thinking everything is an emergency, and then they're whatever, they're tense and
Yeah.
stress level just goes up and they can't take it anymore. Is that
I would say the opposite is true
right? Oh,
because
wow.
they've gone way beyond that. They're desensitized. And
Right.
that's what alarm fatigue is. Alarm fatigue is you're enmeshed in this environment of cacophony all the time, right? And they do long shifts, 12 hours a day for long periods.
Yeah.
You become desensitized to it because you don't have any recourse. You can't, like, the human mind cannot focus on that when it's being interrupt driven. Sometimes as often as every 30 seconds, you hear a beep
Yeah.
and it's constant. So, the problem causes is, missed alarms. There's things called sentinel events where people die because of alarm fatigue, right? Because a patient wasn't, an issue where the patient wasn't dealt with at time because the alarms had been turned off, or the person was so desensitized that they didn't even hear them. And then nurses, they have to deal with PTSD from this, where they wake up in the middle of the night hearing phantom beeps.
Right.
It's a really horrible environment. And it's not only for the nurses and the doctors, but I had personal experience with this with my father-in-law, where he was in the ICU,
Right.
where he was trying to recover from surgery and couldn't sleep because every few seconds something was beeping loudly in his ear. And this is something that, everybody encounters in an ICU. So, for us, this is a really critical thing to fix,
Right.
because everybody else kind of sees it as the junkyard of noise. This is an unsolvable problem. But for us, it's absolutely solvable and something that we're focusing on.
Is there a regulatory component to this, Ophir?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, what we are solving today, and what we're solving today is the problem of alarm fatigue.
Yeah.
That's actually squarely under FDA discretionary enforcement.
Yeah.
And they even actually show examples of that in their literature, which is, analyzing vital signs and doing various things with them. We are not used for active monitoring. Right. So we're not detecting life-threatening events or time-critical issues. We're not controlling another device. And any changes that we recommend are implemented by the clinicians themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Like a future state would be very interesting where the system just takes care of it. But for us, there's kind of like three phases to that. Phase one is where we are at today, which is here's the recommendations, here's the rationale for the recommendations, that clinicians implement the recommendations. Phase two, and this is, when you're working with the various bedside device manufacturers and they give you access to APIs, here's the recommendations. Do you approve? Yes. Okay. Those are implemented on the devices via software. And then phase three is we never talk about this issue again.
Gotcha.
But it takes time to get there.
Right. So just tell us a little bit about how you go to market, Ophir.
Yeah. So for us, the go-to-market motion is every hospital in the world has this problem.
Yeah.
Every hospital in the world has issues with fusion of data, right? That's why these isolated silos are isolated.
Yeah.
It's a hard problem. So, for us, what we do is we go in and we have multiple entry points into hospital systems. One is the chief nursing officer.
Yeah.
Do you want help fixing this alarm fatigue problem and it objectively improving nurse retention?
Yeah.
We can also go in through the hospital innovation arms. They're a great entry point for us because, their folks have asked them, hey, we really need to solve this. It's also part of the Joint Commission, right? Solving the problem of alarm fatigue has been around for, 15 years that hospitals are being looked at with respect to how are you doing? And it's always the same because it hasn't been solved.
Right.
So there's all these various entry points, which, allow us to enter. Once we enter, we show the clinicians what we're doing. They see the high value of it. They get excited, and then it starts moving in. This is healthcare, based on my sort of external perspective, is very much like enterprise IT sales.
Right.
But the coalition that you need to build is broader yet.
Right.
So it's really exciting because, you're going into uncharted territory in a sense, right? Because nobody's ever looked at this data. So for us, going in and solving this problem by fusing these isolated silos. So for us, in order for us to provide safe recommendations for adjustments of alarm limits on these bedside monitors, we have to first learn when a patient is unsafe. Right. So just like in enterprise IT, we cluster vital sign abnormalities together in what we call an incident. A container of context is something bad is happening.
Yep.
And we do that because what we've noticed in the data is that clinicians today make most of their changes when a patient's in distress. And they broaden the alarm limits because they're like, I have to focus on my patient. I can't hear all this noise. Right. Our system first determines when a patient is unstable so that we only provide recommendations when a patient is stable.
Right, right. Gotcha.
And so that's really powerful in terms of improved safety and efficacy.
Right. Excellent. You had mentioned the innovation arms or the innovation committees. Tell us a bit
Yeah.
more about that. How do you actually find them within hospital organizations?
Yeah. I mean, most major hospital systems have innovation investment arms,
Yep.
right? And so we come in and we say, obviously you build the network of contacts or someone introduces you to someone else and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
But then you go in, you say, hey, this is what we do. We're a hospital operations platform. We provide value across nurses, doctors, biomed, risk management, but we start here.
Yep.
They get excited and they bring us into clinicians. Clinicians validate it, and then it expands from there. Obviously, these sales take longer than
Yeah.
most sales,
Yeah.
but the exciting thing about that is that once you're in there and you provide value and you start scaling across the system in terms of the various personas that gain that value from you, then, you're in for the long haul.
Right. Right. Have you gotten funding for your business, Ophir?
Sure have. Yeah, so we actually rolled out of the Paul Allen Institute for Artificial Intelligence up here in Seattle.
Oh,
When I first, going back to the origin story, right? So when I left PagerDuty, I went on sabbatical, and my wife and I bought some property up in the mountains. This was during COVID,
yeah.
and I decided that I was going to join search and rescue as part of my, I had time, so I wanted to
Sure.
help fulfill my civic duty. And I first learned about the problem of clinical alarm fatigue from doctors and nurses that were part of the Go team.
Oh,
So
wow.
when you're going down the trail to the rescue, right, it's sort of like you're hiking, but you're more heavily loaded. You're trying to move faster, but you have time to talk. So when I heard that, one of the other things that I really appreciate is patterns.
Yep.
So I thought to myself, I wonder if this is the same pattern. So I started reading a bunch of academic papers. I saw that, this has been known about since the 50s. And there was a hockey stick motion of academic papers. There were 546 academic papers written from, the 50s until like 2022. And of those, the last 10 years, there was a hockey stick motion. So I was like, okay, there's something here. And they were even showing that you could provide enhancements to the status quo, but those were only kind of one-time, shots. They would make some changes and then that would be it. So I realized that there needed to be a platform where you not only provide new unit level defaults specifically tuned to each ICU's population, but then when a patient diverged from those unit level defaults, you then provided customized limits specifically tuned to that patient. So how do you get there from a background of enterprise IT into critical care and healthcare, right? Like
Yeah.
that's a big leap. So the Paul Allen Institute here in Seattle, they're a world-renowned AI institute. Their ethos is AI for the common good, which I very much appreciate. And their last 5 companies were healthcare companies.
Oh, wow.
So going in to the AI2 and then saying, hey, I'm an AI2 researcher, chief nursing officers. I want to talk to you about this problem.
Right.
Was an incredible way to get really quick validation. So, we did our initial round with the lead was Bonfire out of LA, who we really appreciate. And we remain to this day the fastest company that have ever gone through the incubator, going from inception to customer validation to first funding in 5 months.
Wow.
We just closed another round in November with a new lead and existing investors going super pro rata. So everyone's very excited about this new potential of going in here. For us, the data is what's so fascinating, right? We're providing incredible value to the hospital systems, but the data has such wealth of information in there that you can glean out and provide ever more value. It's been really exciting.
Cool, cool. So what does the next sort of 3 to 5 years look like for you? I know it's probably looking ahead, but what's your longer term vision for your business?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's already really exciting for us is, again, I mentioned the hospital operations platform, right?
Yeah.
So the first thing that we do is we go in, we unify and fuse these data silos, we normalize all that data. And then we provide value to the ICUs. We're already providing value to biomed, right? And biomed, they're like the IT of medical devices, right? Their job is to keep everything up. We're providing them unparalleled perspective on what's happening in each of those devices. And we, for example, overlay the physiologic and the technical alarms on the floor plan of each ICU, right? So people are actually able to see which rooms the alarms are coming from, which devices things are coming from. So we're building more and more value, right? So we're going into risk management because risk management saying, hey, something happened. I spent 9 hours going through Epic and other places to build this profile. I can see it in CalmWave in 5 minutes.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
because of that data and because of the platform, then we can start adding in more and more what we call views, which are containers of context of this is important to you. So what we're viewing is for every hospital system that we integrate with, we're looking at that real-time data where we're pulling in, high frequency data. We're pulling in vitals and alarms every 30 seconds. And fusing that data, the more hospital systems that we bring on, the better and better our visibility is.
Right.
So, for example, the pattern in our IP is sort of what I mentioned before is any domain that has sensors generates signals.
Yeah.
You then take the actionable signals, you cluster them into an incident. But then we have a construct above that we call an event. An event is where you're clustering like incidents.
Right.
So imagine, for example, you're looking at 3 hospital systems that have hospitals in the major metropolitan, and then you're seeing an event across those different hospitals of different systems where individual ICUs are all showing like incidents. Could this be a bad batch of fentanyl that's in town?
Right.
Or God forbid, could this be radiation poisoning because a dirty bomb went off? Or a new pandemic. So the level of visibility that we get as we bring more and more hospital systems on board becomes really interesting because then we can also provide benchmarking and best practices and all sorts of really fascinating things.
Cool. This has been a great interview, Ophir. Thanks so much.
Thanks
We
so
just
much.
got one last question here. We'll just wrap up. What are maybe the 2 or 3 pearls of wisdom that you would have for, other healthcare AI entrepreneurs?
Yeah. One is never give up. It's really hard.
Yeah.
2 is having a background in enterprise IT is really helpful when you're interacting with hospital IT. So, for example, we started out down the path of CalmWave doing our SOC 2 Type 2 from day one, getting HIPAA day one. Like getting all those pieces in place means that you have a much better chance of passing CISO review, right? Security officer review. And then also once you're in there, understanding enterprise IT means that you can help orchestrate the internal hospital IT motions to get the full-time VPN up, to get the networking access list set up so that you can get the data from the various places. So having those backgrounds, I think, is really important when you're going in because hospital systems are, enterprise IT.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Sometimes pretty scary, right?
Absolutely. We learn all sorts of things, but we're glad to help.
So how do you build your team? I mean, obviously you have IT and there's a clinical piece of that. Tell us just a little bit more about that. That's always very important.
Yeah, I was really fortunate. And part of the reason we were able to move so fast in terms of our first funding is that I brought over all the key members of my operations health team from last time to come do it again. And that's world-class data scientists, full stack developers, UX architect, and CalmWave is a unique fusion of those folks and really phenomenal clinicians and physicians all working together, right? So you need to have the core folks who understand, the context, in this case, the enterprise IT context and building world-class SaaS, but then also subject matter experts that can help you align. So like if you're going into hospital systems and providing hospital system type capabilities, you have to have those subject matter experts, right? You'll be asked, who's your nurse? And if you don't have a nurse, they'll be like, get out of here.
Right.
And then rightfully so, right?
Right, sure.
So that's a really key thing to think about.
Wow. Well, this has been absolutely fascinating. Congratulations on your success so far. And
thank you so much.
I wish you all the continued success.
Appreciate it.
Take care.
You as well.